you look at this one here, what's the dependent variable and what's the independent variables? Well, let's see, GP visit, independent or dependent? Is it the thing that's being caused to change, or is it the thing that's causing the change? I mean, would you say? So let's take ACE score. Do ACE scores cause GP visits, or do GP visits cause ACE scores? Right, ACE scores cause GP visits. So therefore, ACE scores is the independent variable, and GP visits is the dependent variable. How about age? Is age a dependent variable or an independent variable? Independent. Age causes GP visits, right? GP visits don't cause you to get older. So age causes GP visits. So gender, independent or dependent? Independent, right? So in this case, males have fewer visits to the GP than females. So notice, the observant will notice is that all these variables on the side there are all your independent variables, and all these variables up here are all your dependent variables. And in 95% of the tables that you see in papers, that's what you're going to see. And you're going to see the independent variables on the side, and then sometimes if there's, the list just a dependent variable there. Other times, the dependent, you'll have to read what the table is about to see what the dependent variable is. Sometimes they don't actually list it, but 99% of the time, the independent variables are going to be in the column going down the side. Okay. So what you're doing when you, what you're doing then is that you're basically, you have some type of theory that violence on TV causes aggressive behavior. Do you agree with that? Do you think watching violence on TV causes aggressive behavior? What would be a rationale for why?
It emphasizes aggressive behavior and
yeah. So if I see someone if I see Denzel watching mowing down people, that I think that it's fine to do that, right? Yeah, or at least that it's acceptable. That maybe not it may be, it makes it acceptable. It normalizes it. That's one theory. What's the theory go the other way? That seeing violence on TV might decrease aggressive behavior. And so what's a case where you might watch violence on TV and it leads to less aggressive behavior? Yeah. Could be fear, could be repulsion. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think it depends on you. I think that some people might be repulsive to perspective, while others might think it's for
So you're coming up with a couple different things that might influence it, right? So because you're saying is that the relationship between violence on TV and violent behavior may have other things that influence it. Like one is, do you have sympathy with the person who's doing the violence, or do you have repulsion against the person who has doing the violence? Does it sensitize you to the violence, or does it heighten the horror of the violence, right? So what you're doing is you're taking this type of relationship saying violence on TV leads to increase in aggressive behavior or leads to decrease in aggressive behavior. And then you're saying it will lead to decrease in aggressive behavior if you have sympathy with the individual and with the person. And then what else? You had something else too about what it might, besides sympathy with the individual. Is there something else? Okay, then increase is that if it, I mean, when you say it desensitizes it, so that means that it makes it acceptable, so you desensitize. Desensitize, what's that? Makes acceptable. Right? Is this likely to differ by gender? What do you think? How's it gonna differ? Maybe. What would you surmise? Would you say it's gonna, that males are gonna be more likely to do this or less likely?
I think they find it more entertaining, more comfortable.
And why do you think that?
Personal experience, I think.
Okay, so that, you know, that it maybe is that males are more likely to do this and females are more likely to do it that way? Maybe. Maybe it's not male, female, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's like the amount of empathy that you have. So it's not really being female, but maybe it's just more like if you're empathetic. And this is, you know, if you're not empathetic, something like that. I mean, something like that. Yeah.
It's also the environment that is very offering the lead. It's very caring and very friendly and real empathetic. People born under different circumstances.
Okay, so do you think that I mean, because are you saying is that your culture or your background may influence your level of empathy?
Yeah.
Will this influence anything else? Will it make it more likely that you're gonna think of it in terms of being desensitized? What you're doing is that you're coming up with your theory, right? You've got a theory here, a behavioral theory for why it is, for what the link is between this and this behavior. And you're coming up with, you know, different types of things that might influence it. In fact, coming up with mediators and moderators in that. In the language of putting together surveys. So when you come up with this, you know, what you're doing is that you're saying, okay, so if I'm going to go through and be interested in studying violence on TV, then I need to make sure that I'm also going to measure empathy along the way. And that I would have to think, well, does empathy relate to being desensitized or not? Or are they separate things? Because you could be empathetic at the same time, still be desensitized to those things. Or maybe being desensitized only occurs if you're not empathetic. I'm not sure. How did you find out? Say it again. Well, yeah, but before you did that, so like, let's say if we just got to this point where we can kind of think of things that would, you know, kind of work, then what would be our next step? Well, what would you do next if in the real world, if we were at this point and I said, well, go home and come up with some type of better understanding of this? Where did you go? You know, I go into Wikipedia and I type in violent behavior and see if they have anything that causes it. I might go and probably look to see if there's books where people have said things like explaining violent behavior in children or the impacts of violent behavior on TV. I might also go look at articles, right? I might go on Google Scholar and just type in violent behavior in children. Well, let's do it. Let's see. We're gonna go on Wikipedia and go on Google Scholar. We'll type in violence on TV or effects of violence on TV on children. There you go. The impact of violence on children. And children in television. There's a book. And viewing preferences, symptom of psychological trauma, and etc. So this is, often what I usually do is I go and I look for a general type of review article. So let's look for a review article. Let's say review article. There you go. A 10-year review of the research. It's kind of old, 2001, but same time, that would be a way to kind of go through and just sort of see what it says. So that's one way, to go through and view the literature. What's another way? What's another way of figuring out this type of relationship? That again. You could test, well, before you do that though, when we say testing, like how would you do it? Well, it's not, let's think. So let's say if you wanted to, if you were going to do this, I mean, you could come up with a survey and give out the survey, right? But the problem with that is that you're kind of guessing, or at least I would be guessing on what to add and ask in the survey. So another option is to do interviews with people, right? So who might you interview? Could do children, right? Parents, could do parents, like what, let's say if you're going to do a parent, what would you ask the parent? Yeah, so you might, say, well, let's, I want, does your child watch TV? Do they ever see, how often do they see violence on TV? What happens when they see violence on TV? Why do you think it is that your child reacts that way when they see violence on TV? I mean, sort of go through this type of process. This is called qualitative research. So qualitative research is and we'll talk about this some more next time, but qualitative research then, that's a type of research that one way you can use it is for hypothesis generation. Because what we're doing right now is we're developing our hypotheses, right? We first identified what we think is our independent variable, and we think is our dependent variable, and then we're coming up with all the other kind of things that might influence it. That's basically, that's your hypothesis, that's your theory. So one way to do it would be to go read the literature. Another way is just to, like, if I was going to look at this, I would probably go and look in the psychology books, because psychology books would have summaries of theories for how it is that, for what impacts children's behavior. So I'd probably do that. And then what I might do is I might go out there and do a survey, do a study with people where I actually ask them questions. And that then you have to come up with questions that then will get them to start generating ideas about, or take that back. You come up with questions that get them to start talking about their experiences. And so therefore, and from those experiences, that helps you generate your ideas. That helps you identify, are you including the right factors? Okay. Great. So to be clear, independent factor one, those are the independent variables, right? Factor two is your dependent variable. I'm going to ask you this on the test. I'm going to give you a paper. I'm going to say to you, tell me the independent and dependent variable. And then I'm going to say, now give me two new, independent and dependent variables for that you could look at. Because the independent variables, right? Like, for example, if you had this idea that violence on TV, how might you go through and measure violence on TV? You were going to do this study with children. What might you do? Yes.
How often does he violence on TV?
Who would you ask?
Both the parents and the children.
Okay, so you would ask the parents, how often does your kids, anyone here have children? No? It's hard to know how much violence your child has seen on TV. Because you can kind of control what they watch, but it's once they get past a certain age, is that then, so that's a tough one. Like if you ask me when my kids were young, how much violence they watch on TV, I might say at the time I would have said, not very much. We're pretty careful about what they watch. But nowadays, when they start telling me about the movies that they watched, it was like, oh, you saw Aliens when you were 4. So you don't always have control. So that's a tough one. Yeah.
I'm thinking of parental watch. TV they have certain account for like Disney and Disney shows. Well, they have their adult accounts. Where they have long size of genres.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could also, if you could get access, if you're in the streaming world, it's probably a lot easier because you can probably actually identify what they're watching, how long that they're watching. Probably makes it easier than if they're just watching TV, like just watching the, So, okay, so you can do that. Yeah.
And you can lie too because use the parenting time and they lie because they're 18.
No, kids wouldn't do that. No.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. You heard from some of your disrespected friends. Yeah. Yeah, it's true that they could lie. So you'd have to have a way of kind of doing it. What would be another way to do it? If you wanted to do a randomized control trial, how would you do it? Yeah, well, like if you're going to do a randomized control trial, bring kids in, right? Separate them out. This group watches My Little Pony. This group watches Die Hard 2. And then, so now you've controlled their television watching. And now that you've done that, so now what are you going to measure? Could be, so depends on how long do you think it takes for the effects. I mean, do you think the effects are immediate? So for example, like if you were just to say, okay, you're all going to watch My Little Pony, and now you're going to go in a room together, and then we watch you play for an hour and see whether or not they prance around and things. And this group, they put them in a room and see if they beat each other with sticks. Yeah. So that's one way you could do it, right? You could, but then what you're assuming is that the impacts are immediate, like you watch it and then you have violent behavior, as opposed to you watch it and then it sort of makes it more acceptable. And so then next time you're in a situation where you might act violently, then you might.
We're not gonna watch the physical using after, we just after parents.
Okay. Yeah.
Any teachers and principals like suspension, behavior cards, report cards, great job.
Could you just suppose that you could just figure out how much violence the kids watch, how much violent TV kids watch? Let's say you could look at their streaming accounts, and then you just looked at the number of suspensions and things like that, because that's a good outcome because it's a good outcome in the sense that you can measure it, right? You measure the suspensions, you measure the discipline and things like that. So let's say if you could do that, and you found that there was a strong association, is that kids who watched a lot of violent TV, they are more likely to be suspended than everything else. Could you therefore conclude is that violence on TV leads to more suspensions? Yeah, but you're assuming that even the kids, follow that farther. Why might that influence it?
Like in the school, the teenage boys are getting more aggressive. And then I can't think about women, but when men get more aggressive, they start acting out, they start fighting more.
And what kind of TV would they like to watch?
Like acting.
So it's a question about does the violence on TV lead to aggressive behavior? Or does aggressive behavior lead you to watch more violence on TV? But see, now this is flipping it the other way. Right? Well, because what you're saying now is that it could be is that aggressive, that there's something associated like hormones, right? Hormones lead to aggressive behavior. Hormones also lead to you watching more violence on TV. So you're watching more violence on TV, and then that leads to even more aggressive behavior. Or maybe hormones lead to aggressive behavior, but if you watch non-violent TV, if you just watch My Little Pony, like if you're made to watch My Little Pony, or it's just not available, then maybe you have less aggressive behavior. Something like that.
In a study like this, would you be able to take a survey to support results, like to keep these variables, but still have a survey on the side that like talks about like gun life and like violence at school?
So, yeah, but the question is, and so yes, definitely. I mean, but that's what you're kind of collecting there, right? You're trying to collect these other information that might kind of come through and help explain this relationship. But there's also a time here. Is that, this is time 0, this is time 1, this is time 2. Right? So you also have a temporal problem. And that what you're saying is that the relationship is not just, when you talk about the relationship between violence and TV, it's like there is this idea that when you have violence now, or you have aggression leads to TV, leads to more violence. And so it means that you've got to separate out. So what you're really sort of wondering is that, well, suppose that you take someone who, you take these two people. One group has aggressive behavior, another group has no aggressive behavior, and that you have them watch that. Does that relationship hold for this group as well? Is this non-aggressive group who watches violent TV, are they more aggressive? Or is it only that people who are aggressive watch more violent TV and survey for evidence? Okay, we're out of time. We'll start there on Tuesday. Bye, Rudy.